I would like to thank you for so enthusiastically inviting me to speak today. My name is Lauren Southern. I am a filmmaker, a YouTuber, and a proud Canadian. In late 2023, I was contracted to make weekly videos by a startup company called Tenet Media. Then recently, the U.S. Department of Justice released an indictment which alleges the founders of Tenet created the company in conjunction with 2 Russian citizens, with funding ultimately originating from the Russian government. Per the indictment, the founders of Tenet Media deceived the personalities they contracted regarding their alleged source of funding. I'll make a few points clear at the outset. At no point in my involvement with Tenet did I ever have knowledge of the allegations in the indictment. And 2, the only person who ever had any creative control over my videos was me. No one from Tenet or anywhere else ever dictated what topics I covered or what opinions I held. I always seek to fight disinformation in all of its forms, and therefore I have a duty to inform this committee that disinformation has been spreading within these very walls. Some in the media and even witnesses to this committee have attempted to paint a picture of Tenet as a hugely influential player in the political media landscape. This, frankly, is just not true. A previous witness to this committee, who went unchallenged, stated that Tenet Media controlled a network of over 16 million subscribers. This is not true. On their largest platform, YouTube, Tenet had barely over 300,000 subscribers. I believe the 16 million figure referred to the total number of subscribers among all of the personalities who had videos contracted or licensed by Tenet. Subscriber base is that, given all of the facts, Tenet had absolutely no control over. To claim that Tenet controlled those subscribers would be like claiming that a TV network had influence over the United States presidency because they air reruns of The Apprentice. The same witness claimed Tenet garnered over 1 billion video views and 20 billion impressions. I have absolutely no idea where those numbers came from. Very readily available public data shows that on its largest platform, YouTube, Tenet received only 16 million total views. Based on the witness's specious numbers, he asserted that Russia received extraordinary value for their money. Anyone with even a cursory understanding of new media would know, however, that $10 million for 16 million views on YouTube hardly qualifies as extraordinary value. In fact, it qualifies as a total failure. So there is, in fact, a silver lining here. If the allegations are true, it appears Russia did attempt to influence Western media, but they failed pretty miserably. Now, I know the chief concern of this committee is how this debacle may have influenced Canadians. Well, I was the only Canadian commentator and the only host that consistently discussed Canadian issues. In fact, if the company had any creative control over me, which they didn't, they probably would have asked me to stop making Canadian videos since they didn't perform very well. So if you were worried about this alleged Russian money unduly influencing Canadian issues, good news. Didn't happen. And I'll be honest, it has been surreal for me to watch our government, experts, and media assert that scripts I would jot down in my notes app in a line at the grocery store were secretly part of a giant foreign influence campaign. Arguably, the largest actual impact on Canadians here has been the amount of tax dollars they've had to spend investigating this non-issue. Some in the media and this government seem to have concluded that the only reason a regular Canadian could possibly hold certain views that do not align with the current Liberal administration is because of pernicious, widespread Russian disinformation. I would like to propose an alternative hypothesis, and I know it may sound insane. I know this breaches the borders of conceivable thought, but maybe, just maybe, some Canadians consulted their own moral compass and decided they don't want this country funding foreign wars. Maybe they looked around them at the hospital lineups or housing prices and thought immigration might be a little high. Maybe they lost their business during lockdown and think, I worry about my freedoms in this country. Some in this government are hell-bent on drastically exaggerating the extent of foreign influence because they can't seem to stomach the idea that they might be wrong about something and that a growing majority of Canadians legitimately and organically oppose what they are doing. They simply can't conceive that they are becoming unpopular naturally, so there must be foul play at work. Let me make this abundantly clear once more. No one but myself and my true experiences as a Canadian have informed my opinions. And to any members of this government who may be listening, I would suggest you familiarize yourself with these opinions because they are rapidly becoming the views of the majority of this nation. Thank you.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Ms. Southern, for coming to this committee today. This has been a very interesting study, and I found your statement today interesting, and it answered a number of my questions that I was going to have for you, but I still have some additional questions. The indictment itself, which you've read the indictment, I assume, alleges that RT employees and Tenet Media used a fake persona named Edward Gregorian to deceive the commentators. Were you ever approached to make content by someone posing as Edward Gregorian?
No, the call I had well over a year ago now that signed me up for the company, I was told vaguely about a tech investor. I can't remember the exact name I was given, but I never spoke to someone named Edward Gregorian.
When were you first approached to do work for Tenet Media?
I wish I could remember the exact date, but it would have been probably 4 months before the company launched.
Okay. And the indictment alleges that this Kalashnikov character edited your videos in the past. Like, is this true? One, and I'll continue. In the past, have you allowed others to edit your videos? Is this a common practice?
The editing process is just the cutting and adding of audio. In fact, any sort of text that would be on screen or any sort of words said by me were entirely under my control. They had these individuals under the fake name editing the initial videos, and then I got an American editor assigned to me later on, and I also edited some videos in-house. But once again, the editing process has no control over the actual content of the videos.
So you would sign off on the final content of the videos?
I would go in and I would say, cut at 2 minutes 30, it's going too long, add a soundtrack at 3 minutes. I had full control.
So you can't say for sure whether or not this Kalashnikov person was involved in the editing at any time?
I mean, I don't know. They had, I believe it was someone under a fake name.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, the U.S. indictment alleges that commentators were paid upwards of $100,000 to produce this content. How much was this? What you found in your experience was what content creators were being paid by Tenet?
This was one of the large surprises for myself when the indictment dropped. I was on $275,000 for all operations. That was not my personal salary. I was contracted to make 3 videos a week, news reports, and 2 mini documentaries, and I had multiple staff, including researcher and assistant. So this budget paid for my studio, flights, videographers, staff, myself. I only made around 100,000 Canadian for my personal salary. So if you want to do a separate panel on the wage gap and alleged foreign influence campaigns, we can certainly do that.
What sort of due diligence did you perform before you began working with Tenet Media? Like, did you ever question where this kind of money was coming from? Did you not find it at all suspicious?
Once again, given the budget I was given and the offer I was given from 2 people who have worked in media and were employed by The Blaze, Lauren Chen, it was not suspicious that this would be a startup company whatsoever. Once again, I was running a severely underfunded operation. In fact, at multiple points, I found it difficult to continue to make multiple documentaries each month. And to afford that, I needed more staff on board. And so I would apply for more funds and was told that the company simply didn't have them available, given it was a small startup.
And do you feel that you were taken advantage of in this situation? Do you feel you were deceived by Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan?
Well, I mean, I wasn't given the information in the indictment, so if it's all true, then yes.
That seems clear. With that, Chair, do I have any more how much time do I have left?
You still have 2 minutes left, actually.
Well, you actually answered a lot of my questions on this already, Ms. Southern, so I'll have to regroup and pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just want to get back to the amount that you were compensated. You said you made $100,000 personal that you were able to take home with you, but what was the total amount before you paid out different contracts?
5,000 US.
Sorry, I missed that. It was 200 and something thousand US?
275,000 US.
Okay, and how many videos did you create for Tenet Media?
It must have been upward of 80. I don't know. I couldn't tell you the exact number, but quite a few. I had 3.
Okay.
Let me give you more specifics. I was contracted to do 3 videos a week and 2 mini documentaries a month.
Okay, and you said they only have 300,000 subscribers. Is that right?
Yeah, but what's more interesting to me is that it was only, I believe, a few months before the indictment dropped that they only had around 100,000 subscribers. And in fact, I had to documentary with the company that was at around 10,000 views for a long time. And mere days before the indictment dropped, it was at millions. So I think the numbers, and I know that there were ad campaigns done to promote the videos, but I think the numbers have been massively inflated by those who have an interest in exaggerating foreign interference.
Well, but what was your idea of the business model here? Because I mean, they're paying you $275,000 US, and I know you're taking home $100,000 after that. But there are others with even more followers, and presumably going to get paid more as a result in their sort of stable of influencers. How are they making money off this in your view?
Well, I mean, I was the top contributor, so I was getting some of the top view counts at the site. I was hustling very hard to make sure my videos did well, trying to grow the company. I did not know the salaries of my peers, so I was under the assumption that they were getting paid the same, if not less, because I was doing a large amount of videos. So it made sense, certainly, that a startup from someone at a tech company could give the amount of money necessary. And certainly I was being asked to start doing advertisements at Tenet. And I assumed, the startup money must be drying up and they need to integrate ads into this. It certainly made sense from all the information I was provided.
And who was your main point of contact? Was it Lauren Chen was your main point of contact at Tenet?
No, I was typically Liam, but really I was kind of just left alone as long as I was fulfilling my contract. I wasn't speaking to them that often.
No, but someone comes to you and they say, we want you to join this, and they make a pitch. You're not just going to join anything. So it was Liam that made the pitch and sold you on it? Lauren made the pitch, and then Liam sent the contracts over. Okay, so Lauren made the pitch. What was your relationship like with Lauren before she made the pitch to you?
Cordial. They're very friendly people. We had met in person before. We had 10 years of knowing her in the same industry as me. She's always kind of just made pretty decent videos on YouTube and for The Blaze and various other companies.
She's in your world. You've known her for 10 years. You've read the indictment, I assume. Here, she and Liam are talking about the Russians and that they are aware of where this money's coming from. That must have sent chills down your spine that you've been working for Russian money.
If I know anything about my time spent in media and people speculating both about the work I've done and personal life and all these things, it's that unless I was there, I don't know anything. I don't know what happened. And I'm not going to make comments about Liam or Lauren because I do not know the inside out of what went on there, other than the comments in the indictment.
So you weren't... Right, so you read the indictment and you sort of shrugged then and you said, well, I wasn't there, I don't know that this is true, so it's of no concern.
I certainly didn't shrug. I'm not looking to work for I'm not looking to be an asset of any government, foreign or domestic for that matter. So no, I was not happy with the idea that I would be working for. I was certainly happy with the integrity of my work, all of which was done of my own volition, all my own opinions. And if there's any concerns by this committee about anything I may have published that was not factual, I'd be happy to correct that. But
well, one thing, I don't know. I mean, one thing you said in your opening, you're talking about sort of people getting frustrated with this federal government, but you said one of your major examples was people who have lost business during the lockdown. I mean, sure, people were obviously very frustrated if they lost business during the lockdown, but you must know, having been very vocal on this, that it was provincial governments that implemented lockdowns, right? You are aware of that.
Sure, but there were plenty of acts by the federal government to shut down legitimate protests, shut down people's bank accounts.
No. Business. Sorry, you said lost my business during the lockdown. I mean, that's you would know. I assume that would be a provincial matter.
I think you're getting into semantics here. There are plenty of reasons to be concerned about freedom
the
in
difference
Canada.
Between provincial and federal governments are certainly not semantic differences. You also said, though, in your opening, your views are rapidly becoming the views of the majority of this nation. Do you think the Great Replacement theory is going to become the views of the majority of this nation anytime soon?
Depends what you mean by the Great Replacement theory. What do you mean?
Well, what do you mean by the Great? Well, that there's an active attempt to replace a white population with a non-white population. What do you mean by it?
I think that there are a lot of people that have concerns about the impacts of mass immigration removing the culture in certain areas. I think you could ask people in Brampton or individuals in Surrey what they think about the language being spoke around them, whether it's a Canadian language whatsoever, whether they feel that their culture is being preserved. I don't think it's an insane concept. And in fact, I think many liberals would agree that many cultures and peoples have been replaced before by mass immigration, our indigenous population not least of all.
You might think it's insane, though, to head over to Russia, speak with a neo-fascist Alexander Dugin, and then praise the guy to say...
Sorry, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
You might think that's a level of insanity.
Mr. Erskine-Smith, sorry. No, the time is up. We're actually over a little bit.
I get to answer the question.
So hopefully another member, can give you time to answer the question, but we're actually already over the time.
Point of order, Mr.
Madam
Chair. Point of order. I think it's fair to allow the witness to answer the question.
So I'm going to move on to Madam Michaud, and then Mr. Johns.
Point of order also.
If you'd like, you can give her time to answer that question from your time.
Point of order.
Yeah, Mr. Shipley.
We've been sitting in this committee for many months, many years now, and prior to you taking over that chair, that was always the policy. If there was a question asked that the witness did have a chance to answer, that was always the policy.
So I actually tried to stop Mr. Erskine-Smith from asking the question. I spoke while he was speaking.
Of some insane things, and I think...
So again, if members feel differently, then they can give the witness time to answer from their own time. Madame Michaud, pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Southern. I'm going to be speaking French, so I hope that you can hear me, that you can hear the interpretation. Thank you for coming here to testify. You mentioned earlier that you had 100% control over your videos. I really haven't had the opportunity to look at your videos, but could you give us an idea of the subjects that you dealt with on the videos? And your understanding of why you were approached by tenant media in the first place? Why they would have chosen you to make 3 videos per week and several documentaries per month. Just give us an idea, please.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to take 2 seconds to respond to the allegations that I am an insane person quickly for interviewing Alexander Dugin. Given my inspiration for the interview was from TVO's The Agenda, Steve Piken, who interviewed Dugin. I don't think we would be calling him insane in this House. I think there is a deliberate effort to slander me for political purposes. Now, to answer your question as to why you think I would be picked to make these videos, I've made a lot of content over the past 10 years, multiple documentaries that have received millions of views and really encouraged a lot of people to consider ideas they haven't thought of before, like the plight of farmers in South Africa who are being murdered, or my film Borderless, which covered mass immigration to Europe from the perspective of immigrants who, quite frankly, were being screwed over and sold a lie by human traffickers. I think that I have a long history of creating very honest journalism that addresses issues that a lot of people are too afraid to broach, and that's why I believe I was approached by Tenet to work for them.
Est-ce que vous avez parlé dans certains de vos...
Did you make videos about the Canadian policies, about politics here in this country, about the stance in Ukraine and Russia's involvement?
I don't believe I recall making a single video about the Russia-Ukraine situation, but I certainly made videos about Canada, and they were all based on my own experience living here as a Canadian. I made a video about housing prices in Vancouver, for example, something I have seen just go to absurd levels. I have families that live around me in my community who have been forced to live in trailer parks because the housing prices have gone so high they cannot afford rent. I look at the inflation with groceries, families struggling to afford food because the taxes are so high, because of bad policy put in by this Liberal government, and I make videos on these subjects. I make videos about the concerns of mass immigration without integration. You know, just a few weeks ago, I had a friend of mine almost lose her daughter's life because an immigrant that refused to get a proper driver's license smashed into her car, just missing her daughter, and then tried to intimidate her into not contacting ICBC. When we have these issues of mass immigration without integration, when we have these issues of so many foreign buyers coming into this country and inflating prices, when we have these issues of not putting the Canadian populace first, people want to hear these opinions. And I'm sorry to tell you once again to the people here who might think that this is all foreign propaganda, it's not. No one told me to have these opinions. I grew up in Surrey. I grew up in BC. I live in this country. I live paycheck to paycheck right now, you know? I struggle under this government, as many other Canadians do. And all of the opinions I put out here are my honest opinion.
Je vous remercie. Je sais pas si vous...
Thank you. Could you explain the events that led to the criminal inquiry on the media and the allegations that have been made about the videos? Were you surprised when this all arose? Were you suspicious before this, how it started?
And I had no reason to be suspicious. Of course, I was surprised when the indictment dropped. I did not have knowledge of what was in the indictment. Once again, I can't comment to how this all happened because I was simply a contracted video creator. I just made videos for them.
Je vous remercie. Vous semblez...
Thank you. I certainly understand your situation, but you seem to be taking very lightly this whole issue of foreign interference that does exist, and Russian interference does exist in Canada at this time. Does that not concern you as much as it concerns me in terms of our democratic institutions, the fact that this does exist and can harm our institutions?
Once again, as I opened in my speech, there were individuals that were witnesses to this committee who went unchallenged, who claimed that Tenet Media made one of the number one podcasts in the world, the Rubin Report. The Rubin Report was created 10 years before Tenet even existed and had no association with Tenet Media. Dave Rubin, God bless him, his actual show at Tenet Media struggled to even reach hundreds of views. And yet that level of misinformation was coming from within these very walls. So forgive me if I seem like I am downplaying what is going on, but there has been a great exaggeration to the point of lying within this committee about the level of foreign interference happening. And the biggest concern I have is the regular Canadians that I interviewed, that inspired my videos, that inspired my content, that are being slandered as Russian disinformation, rather than, you know, the people here who might be disturbed by me correcting the record.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Michaud. Mr. Johns for 6 minutes.
Ms. Southern, before collaborating with other influencers, what steps do you take to ensure the media in which you are appearing is acting lawfully?
What steps do I take to ensure the media I'm appearing in is acting lawfully?
Yeah.
I don't think that, you know, as much as I would love to be able to afford a private investigator to go and confirm every contract I sign, 10 years of working with someone in the same industry and 10 years of working with someone in the same industry and being given a very standard boilerplate contract that I would get from any other company. I've never had this happen before, and I think in retrospect it's easy to say that I should have done more investigation, but what investigation would you have done in my shoes?
I think it's important to do due diligence, and you have significant following on social media platforms where misinformation can spread rapidly. How do you ensure that the content you share is not used by foreign entities to amplify narratives that undermine Canadian democracy or national security?
Are you accusing me of spreading narratives that have undermined
I'm just asking
democracy?
you a question, just like, you know, in terms of how do you ensure that the content you share is not used by foreign entities to amplify narratives that undermine Canadian democracy or national security? What measures do you take?
I ensure that every contract I sign and have ever signed in media gives me full creative control of every single thing I say and publish. That's how I ensure it.
Well, there's concerns that individuals or groups may be unintentionally aiding foreign governments in spreading divisive narratives. How do you respond to allegations that your online content has been used to further Russian propaganda or influence Canadian public opinion?
As far as I'm aware, just this month, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a pause to immigration or a decrease in immigration for the next 3 years, citing unsustainable growth. This is one of the critiques that has been my main critique on tenant media and off-tenant media. And having it portrayed as Russian disinformation by this committee, or even aiding and abetting Russians, has been very interesting. I may understand I may have been right too early on this issue, and as so I must be socially punished by this regime. But although much too late, I happen to believe that Justin Trudeau is making the correct decision there, and I would hope that this committee wouldn't advocate Canadians stop drinking water or wearing seatbelts because someone with the last name Ivanov or Petrov suggested it was a good idea.
No, that's not what we're asking. But what is your stance on foreign interference in Canadian elections and political discourse? Do you believe there is a clear and present danger from foreign actors such as Russia? And if so, what responsibility do individuals like yourself bear in preventing the spread of foreign influence? Do you take
I was
any
a commentator for a channel who had full control over the videos I made, and I ensured they were truthful. If you want to point to anything I've said that has been disinformation or aiding and abetting...
I'm actually asking what you believe. Do you believe there is a clear and present danger from foreign actors such as Russia? And if so, what responsibility do you believe the individuals like yourself and your platform aid in preventing the spread of foreign influence?
I think that it is rich that I am sat here and being asked what I have to do to stop foreign influence and foreign interference. As a Canadian citizen, well, we sit here with MPs like Jennifer O'Connell, who said boo-hoo to Conservatives who wanted actual elected politicians working with foreign governments to be exposed.
So,
I am a regular Canadian.
So, sorry, I take it you don't take responsibility. I'm sorry, it's not your turn, Ms. O'Connell. I'm going to continue. How do you reconcile your business model, which prioritizes user engagement and raking in massive profits from clicks, with the necessity to protect users from harmful disinformation that can lead to real-world consequences like hate-based violence?
How is anyone in this committee supposed to stop disinformation abroad if they can't stop it within this committee? Why wasn't Ben Scott, why wasn't he challenged when he cited false numbers about Tenet's views? Why wasn't he challenged when it was said that Tenet created the top podcast in the world, that they were getting billions of impressions? If we cannot stop disinformation within this committee, I'm sorry, but no one here is stopping disinformation coming from abroad or foreign interference.
What effects do you believe your content has on Canadians?
I think I speak for the majority of Canadians. I think I speak for people who don't have a voice in this government. I think I speak for people who feel they have been censored and shut up for too long by the mainstream media, and I'm proud of it.
Okay, so do you, and I'm glad we're talking about how you personally feel. Can you speak about how you feel about your online content, since it was aiding in objectives that were planned, plotted, and executed in the Kremlin?
Would you say that Justin Trudeau's reduction of immigration was aiding and abetting the Kremlin? Should he be pulled here because he had the same ideas that I had?
I'm asking you, do you have any personal feelings that your online content was aiding in those objectives?
I do not. Okay. I disagree with that. I think I have very normal opinions that were all coming from myself. No one told me to have my views. No one forced me to have my opinions. My opinions are based on living and growing up in this country.
Okay. Have you ever been in direct or indirect contact with Russian government officials, organizations, or agents?
I've spoken to RT before in the past.
Okay.
Before the war.
So, can you provide more information about the nature of these interactions, if any?
Yeah, I believe I've done contributions to RT before, as many did pre-war, including Larry King, including Michael Moore. I think the only interview I ever did that even had anything to do with Canada was a brief interview on the trucker convoy, which was a live report on events happening around me. And I would have been just as willing to share that report with the CBC if they had asked me.
Mr. Jones, that does conclude the first round. Thank you. We move on to the second round now, and Mr. Shipley, you are first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ms. Southern for being here today. Some of these questions have probably already been asked, but we'll make it a little repetitive. But if you could just give us a little more context to these. My first question is, have you ever been employed by a digital media company to create content before signing on with Tenet?
Yes.
Did you want to elaborate on that?
Rebel Media.
And before signing on with Tenet, had your content ever been monetized on YouTube?
Yes.
What was your relationship with Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan? How did they pitch this platform to you? Where were you? What were you offered? And what due diligence did you do before signing on?
They were colleagues of mine in the media sphere, working for various different companies. We had brushed shoulders at political events before, maybe only a handful of times. Lauren and I were fairly friendly. She called me and told me that they were starting up a new company, that they had an investor that was in the tech realm, and I wasn't that interested at first, to be honest. And then she called me a few more times and told me that it would be a totally free speech contract. I could do whatever I wanted. They sent me the offer. And at that time, I was looking to expand and hopefully be able to hire some staff to improve the quality of my videos, and being able to do so while having total freedom and control over the content I produce is, quite frankly, something you get at almost no media companies, very few anyways. So that's why I haven't worked at very many the last 10 years, other than Rebel, which had a similar contract. But yeah, I considered myself pretty lucky to have found a startup company that was looking to give their creators full creative control.
You did travel to Russia in 2018 and published an extensive interview with Alexander Dugin, a man who is referred to as Putin's brain. During your trip to Russia, did you engage with any other political actors? Have you maintained a relationship with any individuals that you met in Russia?
Yes, during my trip to Russia, I did interview quite a few other subjects. I decided against publishing those interviews as I felt that there might be some influence on the direction of them. And I only published the Dugin one because I totally arranged that one.
Have you been back to Russia since February 24, 2022?
I have not been back to Russia.
You unlisted several videos from your YouTube channel on the topic of the war in Ukraine and your travels to Russia. When did you unlist these YouTube videos and why?
I actually enlisted significantly more videos than just those. Things that had to do with just life and relationships and various different topics. I have made a decision a few months ago that I want to take a break from social media altogether. I think the entire thing has become very unhealthy, and one of the ways that I engage with it now is if I go on social media, I remove content instead of add it. So you'll look at this if you find my Instagram, there have been lots of selfies of me removed. If you look at my Twitter, there have been lots of tweets of mine removed. So I go back and I choose a video or a post to remove instead of adding to it, since I think that we have really lost the thread of sanity on the internet these days.
Well, I think there's definitely some truth to that.
I want to go back to your trip that you took to Russia in 2018. Who paid for that trip?
I paid for it.
You mentioned that you did several interviews there. Were you paid for those interviews?
I was not paid to do any of those interviews.
So I mean, it's come up who you interviewed while you were there, Alexander Dugin, who not only has been referred to as Vladimir Putin's brain. Actually, before I ask you this, how did you get an interview with him?
I watched an episode of The Agenda with Steve Piken where he interviewed Alexander Dugin, and then at a either earlier or later date, he also interviewed a translator of Dugin's, who was a University of Toronto PhD student. And I contacted either him or one of his translators and got his email and said, "Mr. Dugin, could I conduct an interview with you?" And in a very brief response, he just said yes.
So I just want to read, in 2014, Dugin said Russia should, quote, kill Ukrainians. He's previously been involved with Pomyat, which has been described as the most significant anti-Semitic organization since Perestroika. He's expressed his admiration for the SS, adopting the alter ego named Hans Sievers, named after the war criminal, who was General Secretary of a Nazi research institute that Heinrich Himmler established. I'm just curious. I know you've mentioned Steve Piken a number of times, and I had limited time to look here, slightly different than the interview that you did. I'll just be honest. Why would you want to platform someone like that?
The exact same reason Steve Piken did and TVO did, because he is an interesting geopolitical figure, and I was more right than I bargained for initially at how interesting he would get. When I watched the TVO interview and when I watched the work of Michael Millerman, one of his translators, they kind of figured these ideas of...
Do you agree with his views on Ukraine?
No. I don't think we should kill the Ukrainians. On the contrary, I think we should be trying to not kill anybody. Not a big fan of killing people, Ukrainian or otherwise.
And do you prescribe to his anti-Semitic views?
No. Once again, you're interviewing me right now. Do you agree with all of my opinions?
No, I actually find some of them quite offensive. I'm just curious what a Canadian language is. Is that Ojibwe and Cree?
Typically in Canada, our national languages are English and French. I kind of figured this was common knowledge in here, but...
Okay. Well, I guess, it's funny, I was just in the Baltic countries and met with the NATO Center of Excellence on Strategic Communications, and a lot of what you put out aligns perfectly with the type of Russian misinformation that I heard about, particularly around immigration. But anyway, that's just a comment. You have been you keep referring to Steve Paikin and the fact that he did an interview with someone. You went to Russia, if I'm not mistaken, you were barred from going to the UK, is that correct?
Yes, I was barred from going to the UK.
And why was that?
That was because I tried to set up a pride parade in Luton, and the Islamic population there typically are not a big fan of that. And I was told that it was stirring up hatred.
And so you went to Russia to stir up hatred against Jews?
I'm so sorry. What are you referring to?
Look who you deliberately made a trip to Russia to interview someone who is one of the most anti-Semitic people around. Is it just to be controversial? Is that you find that funny?
What part? Yeah, I do find it funny that you were accusing me of taking a trip to Russia to stir up hatred around Jews when I don't think Jews came up once during my interview with Alexander Dugin. I don't know where you're getting that from. And once again, Steve Paikin conducted an interview with him. I guess you would have to make the same anti-Semitic accusation against TVO.
Ms. Southern, his views are well known, and you deliberately went there, so you're basically trying to create chaos. Funny thing is, that's what they say Russia does with all the things that they do, is try to create chaos in society. So it sounds like your goal is to try and create chaos, and I don't get the sense that you have a lot of respect for Western liberal democracy as it is. So anyway, that's my time, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to come back to the monetary issue that was addressed earlier. You said that Tenant Media gave you a $275,000 US dollar budget, and your take home was about 100,000 Canadian. That's what you earned for yourself. Yes. Thank you. Did anybody at any time ask you to reimburse that money? When Tenant was closed, when there were allegations, did you meet any by the RCMP or CSIS or any type of security service that you met further to that?
So I have not been asked to reimburse any of that money, but I have been visited by CSIS, who quite frankly have been putting immense psychological pressure on me to become an informant on this subject and other subjects. Ultimately, I declined because I'm not looking to become an asset for foreign governments nor this government, and I did not like the way in which they threatened and stalked me. And I would like to know how much Canadians paid for that, by the way.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. In the UN reported last September, in February 22, that Russia had begun an illegal war on Ukraine. There were more than 11,000 civilians killed and many other thousands that were injured. That's a lot of people. What would you think about being an agent for this type of country that would wage this type of war on another country? Does not that put you ill at ease?
You will never catch me speaking ill of the Ukrainian people. They are good people, and it is horrific what is happening to them and the losses that are happening to their community. And I hope that the suffering they are going through ends, and I hope that the Ukrainian people will be free. I do not and have never wanted to be an agent of any state, an asset of any state, foreign or domestic, and I have always, at any inkling that that is happening, have run the other way.
Merci. Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
I really only have one burning question left, and that's, do you take any steps whatsoever to verify that the people paying you are legitimate and don't have ulterior motives?
This would not be a question being asked of any individual working in media, if not for the retrospect of this situation. I've had contracts, I've worked with many individuals. They have all looked the same as Tenet, and they have never come up with this problem. This is a very unique circumstance. And once again, I think the eyes of retrospect are playing heavy on your questioning.
Well, I think given the situation and that you're the Tenet's been under investigation with the U.S. government, I think it does qualify as a reasonable question.
If you think that there was a action I should have or could have taken that the average person would normally do, please do let me know, Mr. Johns.
Will you take any, in the future, will you be doing any significant efforts to ensure that that the people are paying you are legitimate and don't have ulterior motives? Is this something that you're going to incorporate into your future business model?
I have always worked very hard to ensure that the things I am doing are legitimate, that I'm not being influenced by anyone. I've lost jobs over this. Now, there is a lot of money, as I'm sure you know. Probably not the majority coming from Russia, probably more from China, other countries, going into politics, going into media, going into influencing what people think. The way I protect myself from that, because it is a completely messed up and influenced media organization system going on right now, ecosystem, is I only sign contracts with people who give me full creative control, because right now in this environment, that is the only way to protect yourself. If you are ever working for an organization that has creative control over you, you're going to find yourself in hot water. And quite frankly, that is the majority of media outlets within this country too.
Okay. So right now, you're telling us right now that you're not going to take any different steps to ensure that the people that are paying you are legitimate and don't have ulterior motives?
The steps I'm taking is I'm not going to work in media again, because I am tired of this subterranean Fed level nonsense going on, and I would like to just go on with my normal life as a Canadian, not being harassed by CSIS or the government or you people.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Mr. Motz for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Southern, for being here. My questions aren't intended to harass, but rather find out some information. Now, you're described as a social media influencer, someone who is a political activist and a commentator, but what are your objectives when you, what do you aim to achieve when you connect with an audience?
My aim has always been to speak for people that don't feel they have had a voice in the mainstream media or regular media, and to convey facts. You know, I'm a human being. Everyone that does media is a human being. I don't want people to follow me like I'm some sort of god and take everything I say as, you know, their opinion, 100% influence. I want to provide as much factual information as I can, data from my own research or from on the ground, and let people take that information and look at a variety of different sources and come to their own conclusions. That is my hope for the work that I have done.
So you said this briefly in your opening, I believe, and in an answer to some of my colleagues' questions, but what motivated you or prompted you to start collaborating with Tenet Media? Was it the friendship only, or was it something else?
It was that. It's usually very good to be working with a media company when you are in the, you know, social media content creation environment. I had been independent for so long, and it's very hard to do. It's very hard to fundraise for a studio, for equipment, to do films, and I wanted to expand the type of films I was doing. And although, once again, it was underfunded, it was a larger budget for me to be able to do more interesting and higher quality work than I was doing before.
Fair enough. Now, you had indicated that that you always put significant efforts into making original and thoughtful videos, and that your contract gave you full editorial control. You've made that very clear today. Now, have you ever been compensated to endorse a specific idea?
No.
On anything?
No.
From anywhere?
No.
Have you ever received information or from another organization, an individual, or a government for you to share that on your social media platforms?
No, other than like not paid for. I've certainly had lots of people send me, hey, share this tweet. I just did an interview, share this. Like that's a very normal thing to happen in media.
I don't know how much time I have left, but two thoughts from your answers to other questions. You indicate that when you were in Russia, you had concerns about some other interviews you had done, and you chose not to broadcast or release those interviews, and you didn't explain why.
There was an individual that had told me they could set up interviews in Russia for me, and initially I was excited about this because they were able to get access to quite prominent figures, but as things went on, they were pushing me to do content and work, which once again, I don't. If anyone I feel is pushing me to share ideas, I push back, including, quite frankly, they were trying to get me to go and do a film on the Donbass region before in 2018. I found this strange. Obviously, I didn't know there was going to be an invasion that would happen at any point, but being offered all access to that area, military access, seemed suspicious to me, and I rejected doing the film, and I deleted all the other interviews that I conducted, or refused to publish them, rather. That was in connection with this individual.
Thank you for that clarity. In my final moments, you made a very direct and scathing comment about the current, your opinion of the current media landscape in this country. Can you expand on that a little bit? Obviously, there's, and other people have concerns as well. So can you expand on what you're referring to in your description?
I have been doing YouTube for 10 years. When I started doing YouTube, it was individuals that were interested in sharing their opinions and beliefs without compensation, that genuinely cared about issues. Over the past 10 years...
What I'm referring to is you talked, to Mr. John's question, you talked about receiving compensation, and you made reference to the media outlets that exist today,
yes,
the national media outlets, receiving compensation from potentially places in this globe that are hostile to our democracy in Canada.
Yes, what I was getting to is I believe there is I would have to give a written response later with the details, but based on my time...
Please?
Sorry?
Could you?
Yes, I can. Based on the time I've spent in media, over those 10 years, I believe that a large majority of content is being influenced both from corporations, domestic government, foreign government, being paid for. I would say that even half the contributions, likes, and views on content are now all botted, not legitimate, genuine views. They're being astroturfed, and this is part of the reason that I am personally stepping away from my partaking in social media myself, because I don't believe that a lot of the internet we are engaging with today are real people. It is very different. You can feel it if you spent time on the internet 10 years ago.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Motz. Ms. Zahid, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Southern, have you been contacted by Canadian or American law enforcement about your role in the Russian-run tenant media op, given the U.S. indictment?
Yes, as I mentioned, CSIS came to my house while I was making dinner for my child and tried to speak with me, but did so in a way that I was not comfortable with. And I have also, quite frankly, experienced quite a bit of harassment and stalking from them. When I told them I did not want to speak, they called me dozens and dozens of times. They found my gym. They told me that if I did not essentially become an informant for them, that I love being a mother, I love my child, and I would love to see him grow up and be there to provide for him, and it would be a shame if something happened to me. So I'm not too impressed with the state of law enforcement in this country right now, to be honest.
Are you aware that the content you created for Tenant Media, Russian disinformation campaign, is still available on Tenant's Rumble page?
I have no control over that, but sure.
Have you spoken to Lauren Chan or Liam Donovan since the U.S. indictment?
I have not.
You have no relationship with them?
I have not spoken to them since the indictment, no.
Will you use this opportunity today to call on Tenant to remove any and all content created by you from their Rumble and X accounts?
No, all the content I made was of my own volition based on my own opinions and free speech. So I'm happy for that content to still be out there. Quite frankly, I spent a lot of money making some beautiful documentaries in which hardworking Canadians are featured who put themselves out there and are now being slandered as Russian disinformation. And I think that's a real shame.
TikTok, Meta, and YouTube have all removed Tenant Media from their platforms using the U.S. indictment. X, formerly known as Twitter, has not. So why do you think that is the case?
I have no idea. I don't work for these social media companies.
Knowing what you do now about the Tenant Media and where their money was coming from, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I wouldn't have worked for them if I knew where the money was coming from.